I reflect on quite often with my other mayoral colleagues is that this role that you're actually a specialist generalist. You don't. You tend to know a bit about a lot of things, but there'd be a danger in being a subject expert on only one issue, because that wouldn't serve you well because of the breadth and depth of the type of and scope of the things that you have to deal with in the role. So you're a specialist generalist. So I thought it was quite a good description for what the role is.
Master of...
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Yes, that's a more fancy sort of management way of putting that into... Yeah.
Susan O'Regan is the standing mayor of Waipā and is standing for re-election. Susan originates from Rukahaia and is an alumni of Diocesan School in Hamilton and King's College in Auckland. She has a degree in law and arts from Otago University and practiced as a lawyer in Auckland from 1996 until 2010, when she moved to the South Waipā and the dairy farming life. She was elected to council for the Kakipuku ward in 2016 and graduated to mayor in 2022. Is that all correct, Susan?
Largely, I practiced law in Auckland, and I also practiced law in Te Awamutu. I set up my own barristerial chambers there as well, which I closed just before I had my second to last child, Lily, which would have been over 15 years now.
So you wanted to concentrate on being a full-time mum?
Yeah, and came home to the farm, basically. Yeah.
Was it hard to close your practice?
Very. Yeah, really hard. I mean, I loved the human contact. I liked being able to help people in that context, but my priorities were my family. It sort of, at the time, I was doing a lot of litigation work, largely in the family court, and it sort of seemed a bit of a false economy to put my own child into daycare and then go and worry about other people's children. So she was my primary concern at the time. So that was the decision made.
How many children do you have?
Between us, we have 5, ranging in age from 26 down to 11. Blended family. The old traditional family is not ours. We've got a little bit of yours, mine, and ours. But yeah, all great humans, and they all live with us. So off and on. Some of them are overseas at the moment, and some are down the South Island. But yeah, all based out of here.
It seems to be a theme with the mayoral candidates in Waipā this election. I think Mike Patet has 5 or 6 children. Claire St. Pierre has 6.
Yes. Yeah.
So big families,
yeah.
Which is a bit unusual these days.
Yeah, it is, I suppose. But I mean, I come from a rural background, so rural families tend to be, I suppose, slightly on the larger side. Although, in saying that, I've only got one brother myself. But no, look, we love it. It was our choice to have the family that we have, and we're blessed that they're all, great people and good fun and healthy and fit and doing their thing. It's great.
Now, you come from Rukahaia. You grew up in Rukahaia, I should say. Am I correct in thinking you grew up on O'Regan Road?
No, just down the road. Rookie Station Road actually was where our farm is, but O'Regan Road bounds where our family farm was. It was my grandparents owned that farm, and our farm was adjacent to that. And my dad ran the O'Regan sawmill. For those who are familiar with the area, there used to be a sawmill there, and that was my grandparents and my great uncle and my dad's. So yeah, the O'Regans were a big name, and my grandmother was a Reed of Reed Road fame in Ngāhanapōuri, so very much deep roots in that area. You are
a Waipā girl, born and bred.
Through and through, yeah, over a century connection to this area, and made the decision to raise my family here and do business here and practice law here and farm here. So yeah, it's part of me.
Now you have said about O'Regan sawmills, a memory has just leapt into my mind. As a child on the farm, helping Dad unload timber from the trailer, yes, with O'Regan stamped on the planks. Oh,
brilliant. Classic. Yeah. And there are still, we started building transportable homes too. They were some of the first ones, I think, almost certainly in the North Island, maybe in New Zealand at the time, in the late 70s, I think, around that building boom. And I think there's still the occasional house around here. Invariably at the moment now they're sort of more staff houses with that pink writing stamped on them, O'Regan sawmill. So yeah,
that might be a good place to start. Housing.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got a housing deficit in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to address that? How are we going to look after our increasingly older population. Not everybody, of course, can afford to live in a retirement village, and we depend on social housing. I see Canada has just announced, the new Prime Minister, they've just announced a $26 billion package to kickstart the portable housing industry, houses built in factories and then shipped out on site, to quickly alleviate their housing problem.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we should be looking at in Waipā.
Yeah, look, I think that this government's talking about standardising a lot of things. They're certainly looking at it in the education sector. But in Waipā, we've a little bit of an outlier. We've actually increased our affordable housing stock of recent years, and we have a very definite policy around ring fencing that housing stock and ensuring that it remains sort of sustainable. We recently opened properties in Leamington. It was a great joy to hand the keys over to Habitat for Humanity, who are running that for us. But yes, look, I think we have a social conscience in part to make provision for members of our community who, for one reason or another, haven't managed to find themselves in a home at a later stage in their lives. And I think I'm really proud that Waipā has actually, as I say, bucked the trend in that space. We have retained pensioner housing, and we have actually extended it.
That's one of the interesting things about Waipā. Ostensibly a very conservative voting region, yet we're not having the issues with Maori working with local government as some of the other regions have. We don't seem to be having that negativity. In some ways, it's quite progressive, even though it's very conservative.
Yeah. Look, I think Waipā has always been that way. I think we were, going right back to the days of electing a 21-year-old Marilyn Waring, a soon-to-be outed lesbian MP in a very conservative electorate, as you say. So that's way back in the 70s. So, and then to be replaced by another woman. We've always been quite progressive, notwithstanding what could be seen to be reasonably conservative financial policies or financial views. In terms of relationships with iwi, mana whenua iwi, look, if you know anything about the history here, you know it's the crosshairs or the crossing point of the three major iwi. In Waipā we have at least 10 to 12 recognised hapu groupings. Look, really complex issues we need to unpack and adhere to. We obviously have a handful of joint management agreements or arrangements with iwi once they're settled out through the Waitangi tribunal process. But I think it's pretty clear that the population in our district, if you look at the demographics, whilst we have an ageing white population, we also have a very much growing younger Māori population, and we need to be really cognizant that success for Māori and Māori business, young Māori people, is success for everyone. And once you understand the demographics and what future Waipā will look like, the more you have to accept that is going to be the case. And that's part of what the legacy, I guess, of colonisation and a legacy of those the three meeting here means on the ground in Waipā.
I found that quite heartening because, speaking to, you're the third candidate of the three I've spoken to, everybody is quite supportive of iwi. And I found that quite refreshing, especially since central government's been rolling back Maori language, te reo, and we've had this awful kerfuffle about the Treaty of Waitangi. So that, for me personally, that's been a very heartening thing about Waipā.
Yeah, look, we've got a Māori ward. We supported the creation of that, and unfortunately having to go through a referendum this election. I'm not in a position to really form a view on whether it's going to succeed or fail, but I'll certainly be supporting its retention, as I voted in support of it when we put it through, and actually the previous representation review as well. I guess I don't share some of the more right-leaning politicians' views in Wellington in this space, and I don't think most mainstream New Zealanders do either, quite frankly. I think most Kiwis just want to get on with getting on and want to address the big issues, not these sort of fringe concerns of extreme right thinking or conversely extreme left thinking.
Well, now that you've said that, you did post on your social media a couple of weeks ago. You were quite happy about the new rules about road cones.
Yes.
And I have to ask you about that because road cones are a very populist issue, a reactionary populist issue. I think the last poll I saw, maybe a few, I can't remember how long ago it was, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, found that 75% of Kiwis thought it was a non-issue.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people in Cambridge necessarily would agree with that. I recall some months back now, I jumped in a car with our traffic engineer and our group's manager for service delivery saying, hey, look, can you just get in the car with me? I invite you to come and have a look and see what Cambridge looks like right now. And this was in the height of, I think we had about 27 active construction sites in the broader Cambridge CBD. And it was just awash with cones. And I guess it's more about, I invited them to see these construction sites through the eyes of the users rather than the eyes of the civil construction companies. And I guess you'd produce a different answer when asked, is this an overkill or is it not? My feeling was that it was an overkill, and what had happened was that you had a handful of sites of construction that were dealt with individually with no real overview or holistic view about what this actually would look like on the ground. And unfortunately, it inflamed residents. People got really, really angry. I even had people messaging me saying, let's change the name from Cambridge to Conebridge. So there was a very strong sentiment in Cambridge about that. I welcome the changes that this government has brought in respect to using a risk-based analysis of those traffic management plans. And I think that most people would welcome a more common sense approach to it, especially when you're looking at the cost often that the implementation of those rather onerous obligations under traffic management plans can actually mean when it comes to some of these projects. I think at one point I talked to Sean Horgan from Waipā Networks, and he was telling me that if you did the replacement of a simple power pole across bar of it, $1,800 is the cost to do that in terms of the labour and the materials, and it's another $1,000 for a traffic management plan. When you start stacking the numbers up, there needs to be some more common sense, and I guess that's why I welcome that kind of more common sense risk approach.
Well, on that note, I live on a main road, State Highway 1B, and whenever there's power pole works or traffic works, you've got traffic control management, and I find it absolutely necessary. Just watching the way that some motorists behave is really quite shocking. They don't slow down, they speed through, they yell out the windows at the workers, not very nice things.
No.
And there is a very good reason why we have this traffic management, because of unruly people and people who really don't care.
Look, I absolutely. I mean, that's really quite deplorable, and I am aware of instances where particularly road workers have been abused. Really, do not condone that at all. And there is a very definite need for traffic management. It just needs to come with a layer or a lens of more risk assessment rather than just carte blanche application of a policy that was rather over the top. If you consider some of the sites that these multiple works were found, particularly in places like Cambridge. I appreciate high speed areas like 1B definitely need it. You never don't, but it's just having a more common sense approach.
Well, if you want to save some money, come and see me, because I'm forever picking up road cones out of our drains.
Oh, really?
Well, kids like to pick them up and then heave them around, and we've got a small collection.
Oh dear, they're heavier than you think too, I believe.
They are quite heavy.
Yeah.
I just put them on the side of the road, and hopefully somebody will pick them up.
Yeah.
Now, going back to people complaining about road cones.
Yes.
Let's talk about abuse, because that's become a really big issue all over the country, especially with female politicians, women politicians. Men aren't immune from it, because I write an opinion column in the Waikato Times, and I've had death threats.
I'm sure you have, yes.
The first time was a big shock. The second time wasn't a big shock. And I've gotten used to it now, but it's a different level of abuse that's being directed at women. And it's quite nasty. You said yourself in the Waikato Times recently that you've received death threats and you had an effigy of a pig.
No, it was me. It was an effigy of me, bound and gagged on a toilet, sort of almost life-size, very, very heavily gagged, hog-tied, with a sign with my name written on it, and the sign was held up with a butcher's steel, which is, of course, what you sharpen knives with, and a New Zealand flag shoved in there for good measure. So it was found just outside Homebrew in Cambridge on the main street, opening day of field days.
And how did that make you feel?
Oh, shocked initially, and then sort of very perplexed and puzzled, fearful, because once you became aware that there was a butcher's steel there, that was a reasonably sinister sort of thing to have in an installation, or whatever you like to call it. I guess the piece that worried me most about that particular day was that I had received a really unseemly email at some odd hour in the morning from somebody as well, sort of with words along the lines of "your day of reckoning will come," that sort of context. And then later that day, my son got off the bus here locally, and it was followed by a car down our no exit road, and the car had no number plates. And he felt, and he's not a scaredy cat kind of a kid, he was 9 at the time, and felt so uneasy about this car following him as he walked home that he dashed into and over a gate and into our farm and hid in some shedding or behind a tree until they went. So it's
every parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah, and so yeah, I mean you can deal with the bizarre letters and the strange things, and then you can deal with a really weird and quite veiled threat at effigy, but then to have your son followed, the fact that you're making 2 police complaints in one day was pretty...
Did they come to anything? Was the person apprehended?
No, the police couldn't find any CCTV footage, which is interesting because it was across the road from the police station in Cambridge. But they don't tend to, the cameras don't, they're following, they're centred on traffic, not on the reserves. And the reserve was where, if you know the area there, it sort of shoots out, it was where the effigy was found. And there was a car of interest located in respect of my son being followed, but it was decided that it didn't have any real connection to anything to do with local government or me personally. They were sort of generally known rat bags, but they didn't think that they would have been involved in something like that. So nobody was ever found.
So what was the effigy all about, do you think?
Well, this is the puzzling piece of it. I can only assume, because it was next to a sign, that you'll be aware of some of the signs we put up in Waipā telling people what's happening or about to happen in this area as an explanation of the works that are about to take place or taking place. I can only assume it was about cycleways, because we were about to undertake some cycleway construction in that area. So that was really all I've managed to piece together on that one. Somebody and up and down the country, cycleways have become a lightning rod for people's aggression towards a local government, and perhaps prior to that to the Labour government, on account of their views around modal shift and climate emission reduction approaches. So.
Well, on the subject of cycleways, of course, it was maybe a year and a half ago now, Waipā shut down its social media comment sections, simply because it was a small group of people constantly berating, very negative about every single thing that was posted on social media about the council's activities. And, well, personally, I found that a bit of a relief once that stopped, because it was pretty nasty. But a lot of it was centred on the cycleways. I pay my rates, and I'm paying for this rubbish that nobody ever uses, and people feel extremely aggrieved about it. Now, just recently, just the other day, I had a wonderful conversation with an 83-year-old woman who lives towards the end of Hamilton Road, her and her 85-year-old husband cycle everywhere. They don't use their car only at night. They go to the doctor, they visit friends, they shop at the supermarket on their electric bikes. They go all the way across to Leamington. They were reminding me that Cambridge is a wonderful place for retired people because we have these wonderful cycleways, which are perfect for mobility scooters. The other conversation I had was with young parents whose children go to school in the centre of town in Cambridge, and they were just saying what a relief it was to know that they can send their kids off on scooters or bikes and know that they're not going to encounter any traffic. So there is a whole other story to this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think sometimes we allow the negative people to drive the conversation, but there's also a silent majority who have a completely different perspective.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And to your point around the closure of comments, that's not a decision made lightly by a communications and engagement department, because that's your fundamental two-way a two-way conversation has to enable one party to be able to reply. So it was a really challenging and big decision to make. But if you understand, and I'm really pleased to hear you say that you felt it was really challenging in terms of the comments that were there, if you can understand the makeup of our comms and engagement teams are usually young women, younger first time out of university, or they're a young kind of department in general, and we have to be concerned for their health and well-being, and it must be a really torrid day to come in and man those or staff those feeds with the ongoing tirades of negativity and abuse. I mean, I know what I get, and I'm a 53-year-old, I've been around the traps a few times woman, and I find it challenging to hear the criticisms. So I can only imagine what it would have been like for some of those young women in that department. And the abuse is extreme. It's really rather extreme. So the decision was made, and I'm glad they made it, and I stand by it. It's really disappointing that we had to do that, but that is nevertheless the way it is. In terms of the cycleways, it's been a little bit of a lightning rod, I guess, for that discontent. And you're right, a lot of people use those pieces of infrastructure and really enjoy them and are draw cards for Cambridge in particular, for people, and we never hear from them, but we do see them in the data in terms of them being used. So if they were never being used, the counts wouldn't be as high as they are. So and I think the fact that so many children use them to get to and from school, removing cars off the road by parents having to drive them places is a real win.
This elderly couple I quoted, they moved to Cambridge from Hamilton simply because of the cycleways, because they they're active and they wanted to be out and about, and they couldn't ride their bikes much in Hamilton. It was too congested, too difficult, too complicated. Yeah,
I spoke to another couple, an older couple as well, who retired to Cambridge of recent years, and they came from Lee, up north of Auckland. Same thing. When they sat down, they worked out they wanted proximity to a hospital. They wanted a place that had a village feel, and they loved cycling, and so it was a no-brainer for them.
I think one of the points that a certain, I'm going to be blunt, a reactionary percentage of our local population. The point they're missing is that Cambridge and Awamutu, Waipā in general, is growing fast. Yeah. And if we're not future-proofing now, we'll never catch up. We've seen the example of Auckland as a great one. Delaying of big projects for decades, and suddenly the crunch comes and it's catch-up, and it's very, very expensive, and it's very, very complicated. Yeah. By doing the future-proofing, by thinking forward now, we're going to save ourselves a lot of money and a lot of pain in the future, aren't we? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's that it's really hard for the examples of cycleways. We've seen how hard it is to retrospectively fit those sorts of things, that infrastructure. So it doesn't come without significant cost and community feedback, because a lot of this is a change management kind of discussion, really, isn't it? It's about people not really liking change. And I can understand that, but we do need to make sure that we provide infrastructure that is fit for the future and fit for the way that we're going to use our communities or use our towns in the future. I think we sometimes make a mistake assuming we're going to be the same but just bigger. I think we'll see quite significant shifts in the way that people live, people move, people work, people play and eat, people go to school. So I think you've got to be quite futurist in your thinking when it comes to turning your mind to what infrastructure will be required into the future and think of those needs, not what is actually needed right now.
On that point, I was very disappointed. I am an ardent supporter of the waste to energy plant for Te Awamutu, Parewa. I was very disappointed in the council's response to Parewa. I thought, we're growing, we're going to need industry, we're going to need jobs, a wide variety of jobs. We're not really a rural district so much anymore, we're quite urbanised. Parewa was a perfect example of an opportunity to create jobs, because it's not just about turning waste into energy. Overseas, wherever these plants go in, and there's lots of them everywhere, huge hubs grow up around them, horticultural hubs using the heat and the electricity and the CO2 for growing vegetables and flowers. We have all kinds of industrial processes grow up around the plant, utilising the different resources these plants provide. So it's not just about maybe the 70 odd jobs at the plant itself, it's about the hundreds and hundreds of other jobs that would eventuate. I had a wonderful conversation with Simon Bridges, who's on the Parewa board, and he said, Parewa has the potential to power every single home in the Waipā District. He was just saying, with your water resources in the Waipā, you're the perfect, of all the regions in New Zealand, you're the most perfectly placed for data centres. And we've got electricity. The Waikato region as a whole, we produce a substantial amount of the nation's electricity now. Waipā, we haven't really started to discover that potential yet, but we do have the potential to be able to have data centres and to power them.
So, look, you raise a really valid point in terms of the obvious support and or opposition to the waste energy application. Waipā, I won't go over the process because it's probably a little boring, but in terms of Waipā District Council's decision to tender an opposition and evidence in opposition, once the matter was called into a board of inquiry, that centred around a handful of points which are covered obviously in my evidence, but critically, we're not opposed to innovative technology to address this issue of waste, which is not going anywhere in a hurry. We do need to be innovative, we do need to think laterally about how we're going to address this issue. But I think it's such a critical, as does Waipā, think it's such a critical issue. We really need some form of national strategy and national direction around what this would look like in New Zealand. And just not something that any Joe Blow can hang up a shingle and say, hey, I'm burning lots of waste here now to make energy. And critically, that regulation would be really clear about what technologies were okay and weren't okay, and the limitations that sit around that and regulation for it, where it would be better appropriate and where it wouldn't be. So it's not a carte blanche hatred of waste to energy technology at all. It's more about calling for a framework that if our country thinks it's necessary, how it should look on the ground. So it was on that basis, along with a concern around what this particular application meant in terms of Te Awamutu particularly, around how it didn't sit easily with our planning we have currently, which we've obviously endorsed again more recently in Ahuaki, our spatial plan, and also really highlighting the overwhelming amount of opposition that came from people within the community.
Okay, I'm going to haul you up on that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to let's chat.
Because, yes, you've quoted that numerous times, as have the other candidates, saying the community was against it, the number of applications was a record. Don't Burn Waipā made no secret of the fact that they had a production line of putting out these forms. We'll fill them in, all you have to do is sign them. So does it actually reflect the community's attitude? Now, I've written 2 big pieces about Parewa, and I've investigated all the misinformation that's been swirling around about the process. I've had a lot of people approach me on the street going, I really liked your piece, I've seen these plants in operation, bring it on. So again, are we being driven by a small vocal minority, and there's a big silent majority out there who have got an open mind? I've had a lot of people come to me and saying, I don't know anything about waste to energy plants, this is all new to me, but I'm very interested to learn more.
Yeah. Hence the need for a national strategy and a national direction, a conversation around that. Look, the numbers of people that filed or gave us feedback or submitted with the original application sat around 1,353, I think. So to give you some, it doesn't sound like much, I get that, but you've got to put it in context. And the context to that is that in our recent long-term plan feedback engagement with our communities, which of course allocates our budgets for the next 9 years, we had 135, I think. And for our water reform discussion, we had 108. And you know how formative water reform is in terms of being the single largest change in local government since the 80s. When you put context around it like that, 1,353 people saying we don't like this is actually quite big. It's quite a big volume, and the single largest we've ever had on any kind of application.
But the water didn't have an organised group running the opposition to water reforms. Don't Burn Waipā is a completely different, and it's got a completely different context. But
I think too, you have to point to the other people who have opposed it in the course of the application progressing, which includes Fonterra and Waikato Tainui. And those 2 organisations collectively speak for a very large number of people in this region. So look, I think it's pretty clear that we need to have a bigger discussion as a nation, I think, around this technology, and we've got to be innovative because it's not going anywhere in a hurry. It's just going to keep on being, keep being created. As much as we try to minimise waste, and I'm an avid believer in waste minimisation, and that's our strategy at council, you're always going to have waste being created, and we need to find sensible ways of dealing with that. But I just think it needs to be something that is done so at a strategic national level. Well,
the council's statement to the Environment Court said that Waipā is going to focus on waste minimisation and a zero waste strategy. The question I asked the other 2 candidates is, how are you going to achieve what nobody else in the world has managed to do? New Zealand landfills 75% of our waste. We are the worst recycler in the OECD. Of that 75%, 50% of it is what we categorise as non-recyclable. There's nothing you can do with it except bury it or burn it to create energy. How are you going to achieve what nobody else has managed?
That's a really good question. We have a strategy that's been worked up in conjunction with our communities, and aspirationally, and let's be clear, they are aspirations. You're quite right. It's a pretty audacious one. Our aspiration is to create a situation similar to the one in Raglan. We're looking at, we have actually earmarked money for a resource recovery centre to be developed in Cambridge, in Maitosejan Drive, I think is where we're looking at it, being developed. But yeah, look, there's always going to be, as I've said, waste that no matter how good you are at minimising your waste, no matter what your strategies are, and you highlighted this, you're always going to have stuff going to landfill. So all the more need for us to actually have a national conversation around how we deal with that. And if the technology we're going to embrace as a country is waste to energy, then let's have some really clear rules around how that would look in the ground. And I've been really, right at the beginning of this conversation, I said I was really keen to have that conversation nationally and be open to those innovative ideas. I just don't think that an independent company coming and setting up on the outskirts of town in a place that flies in the face of all of our planning is the right solution right now in that place, in the absence of that clear national discussion.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that, but I'll just make one more point. Australia, of course, have just finished building their first 2 waste-to-energy plants. They've gone through this whole, the same debate,
Yeah.
and they've got, I think it's 11 more are planned over the next 10 years. The waste-to-energy plant came first, the legislation came second. And their legislative process was quite simple because, all you have to do is look at Europe or Singapore or any of our close trading partners and see what they've done and basically just reapply it.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated. Well, it is, but it's not.
It is a little bit. And I mean, you'll be aware of the issues that I also raised in my evidence, echoing the specialist evidence of Robert Quigley in terms of social impact assessment, which was missing, dare I say it, from the applicants' work, which centred around issues around community aspiration and in particular the stigma that can be created when developments or projects of this size are bought or are built around communities. And in Robert's evidence, he used the Huntly Power Station as a case in point and went into quite some detail around there. And the stigma that's attached to that, which means the drop in house values, the disincentive for people to set up business, so often it's a perception thing. And a stigma that attaches to a town that is perceived potentially as a place that is where, in this instance, where rubbish goes to die, for example. And that does not spell good outcomes for that community because of that stigma and because of that perception. So from my part, it's the location that was particularly challenging for us. But again, I think we need a national discussion and a national direction around what we agree as New Zealanders as we see being fit in our community.
Okay, now in your last Waikato Times article, you talked about my first term as mayor was focused on much needed considerable change within council before we could make real progress. What does that mean?
It means that we've had an organisation that had, to my mind, become a little complacent, and I think most people would tell you that they're...
What do you mean by complacent?
There hadn't been a whole lot of change in the organisation for a long time. It was pretty much doing things the same way as it had been done for the last 10 years, 20 years. And you and I both know that most businesses, if you don't self-reflect within and analyse yourselves continuously and seek continuous business improvement, you're destined to fail or at least stagnate. And that's essentially what had happened. So that takes... we'd got to a point, I think, where our region has been seen as a rural region. You touched on it before about not being so rural and provincial any longer. We have these sort of sprinklings of metros, and I've often described us as being a rural and provincial district with metro problems or metro challenges in terms of the urban areas. So I think we had an organisation that had not changed much with times, with technology, with growth of population, and with people's changed aspirations and expectations from council. So it was just overdue a change, an overhaul, and that starts at the top, I guess. And I campaigned on a mandate for change, and I think I have it. So that in turn manifests itself in terms of change of the chief executive, and now obviously change through that around that executive table, which is evolving and will continue to evolve because, of course, 1 July we're going to have a vastly different shape and sized organisation on account of the Waters work transitioning out. And so we need to have a right-shaped organisation and a right-sized organisation for the remainder of the business of council.
So you're saying that the council organisation, the Waipā bureaucracy, has become a little bit more flexible in its attitudes?
It's changing. It is beginning to change. Culture change is a tough thing. It does not happen overnight. It's a little bit like altering the course of the Titanic, but definitely it is changing, and it has a long ways to go. I accept that, but it is changing.
I think we're hearing this a lot out of Australia and all across New Zealand, is that councils make arbitrary decisions without really consulting with the people who are involved and the people who have to deal with those changes. Do you think that applies to Waipā?
We've got really clear obligations under the Local Government Act around our need to consult and engage with our community. They're pretty clumsy, and that probably goes to some of your questions around how we truly engage and how meaningful is that engagement. But Yeah, look, I'm confident that we engage at a level that we're required to. I do think that there is sometimes a more of a transactional approach to things, which doesn't really deliver outcomes that most people or a lot of people are after. And I think we need to move to being better capable of looking at the context of situations and understand that decisions need to be made on a more relationship or relational type basis rather than just transactional. But I think that's the evolution of people's needs. I mean, I used to blow my mind. Gary Dye, the previous chief executive, said to me, gosh, the days have gone, Susan, where people would line up outside come Christmas to come and thank us and give us Christmas cards. Now, it's quite a different thing. Community has changed. Community expectation has changed, and the council has to as well.
Is a lot bigger as well.
Oh yes, a lot bigger, a lot more diverse.
Not the small Cambridge, for example, and Tiamutu. When I was a child, 3,000 people, 4,000 people. You could have that community kind of engagement, but we're between the two towns. We're basically a city now.
The population falls short, obviously, a city, but much bigger. You're right. The populations have grown, and it's much harder to have that intimate, perhaps, and genuine kind of engagement that you could have in the past.
And you're not going to please everybody all the time as well.
No.
And I think certain people have to realise that banging your hand on the table and saying, "I pay rates, I demand things be done my way," it's very limited thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an impossibility to please everybody. An absolute impossibility. And it's an impossibility to deliver the world's most perfect community engagement. We are getting better at it though. We're finding better ways and better tools. They are slightly more expensive, so we need to understand that some of this comes at a trade-off in terms of cost. But yes, we have very clunky requirements under the Local Government Act, and I'm hopeful that may change. I took part in an electoral reform working group steered very ably by Mayor Nick Smith earlier this year and late last year. And one of our recommendations, because the whole body of work is designed to boost engagement in local government elections, which of course is quite dismal. And one of those pieces was seeking an amendment to the Local Government Act to enable us to use more innovative and community-centric and grassroots type engagement. So look, there's a whole suite of recommendations in there, which I'm sure you'd actually be really interested in knowing more about, and I'm happy to send you the work that we did on it. It's really exciting.
Well, let's tackle we'll have to be quick on these because we're running out of time rapidly, but okay, driving to your house from the other end of Waipā, I saw maybe 20 signs for councillors and mayors, potential mayors.
Yes.
And they're all a lot of going to cut costs and reduce rates.
Yes.
I find that a little bit disingenuous, to be honest, because
I'm with you on that one.
I've been watching it for decades, and people come in and we're going to slash and burn, and nothing ever happens. And Waipā does have quite a high rates bill. Yes, we do.
I think it is disingenuous to claim that there is, to be able to come in and claim that you're going to met out only single-digit rates increases. I think people who are making those promises either are unaware of the complexity and the true cost of the services that we provide, or they're causing a little bit of mischief. In essence, though, I think that we absolutely have to do better with the dollars that we do get. And a lot of that comes around, and it's not the little fringy bits, the number of people you send to a conference or all the little bits.
The $17,000, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's not those bits that are going to be the big chunky bits. The chunky bits are our infrastructure contracts or our big pieces of work. And it's become pretty clear to me, and it's not just Waipā in this instance, this is endemic in the whole of the local government sector. We haven't been particularly great at asset management, and I say that in the first instance that often we don't know where our assets are and therefore what condition they're in, and therefore at what point should you start committing money to renew or maintain or look after them. I think Waipā is probably a bit better than most. Our record keeping does appear to be reasonably okay in this space. But I think we can get better at the contracts we strike with our contractors, get the scope of those a lot tighter, manage them a lot better, and make sure that we are stretching that dollar a little bit further. The other thing that I think is really important to consider too is the use of innovation and technology to enable us to be more critical about where we spend that money. Are we spending money at the point of just as it's needed, or are we spending it in advance? We could sweat that asset another 5-10 years or what have you. So there are increasingly more and more pieces of technology that will enable us to be more targeted and clever and smarter about how and when we invest. So it's those big chunks we've got to get better at. It's not the fringy bits. I know that stuff creates a lot of angst in communities. But frankly, it's a drop in the ocean in terms of our council expenses. It's the big chunky bits. It's the infrastructure stuff that we really need to be worried about.
One of the other candidates talked about user pays and council developing its own businesses to generate income. Now, that second one I found very, very interesting. So I spent a few hours online looking all over the world, notably in Europe and North America and Australia, to see what councils were doing to generate income, and it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. A lot of councils have failed, have tried things and they've failed, but an awful lot more have actually done wondrous things. Renewable energy, for example, that's been well used all over the world. Councils have set up renewable energy projects and they provide great dividends for the council and have contributed to rates reduction. So I thought, well, that's a good, valid point. As for user pays, that scares me because the people who suffer the most with user pays are the people who can least afford it. We have a lot of wealthy people in the Waipā. We also have a lot of people who are living on the margins. And once you bring in user pays, they're the ones who are stuck with it, really.
We do have a level of user pays anyway. Our fees and charges are targeted towards people, the consumer who's using that. Sometimes they're offset with a sort of public good component in terms of meeting those costs, like swimming pools, for example. You pay to go in, but you're not paying the full amount of what it costs if you itemise that particular visit.
Well, I think that's fair enough.
And that's good, because there's a community good in that, and that's what we should be doing as a community. And in terms of, sorry, what was the first bit? User pays and the other bit?
Council investment.
Council investment, okay. Look, I get a bit anxious around that kind of conversation. There are some councils that have been fortunate enough that they have had assets bequeathed them. I know up in far north, for example, there are shares and ownership over ports and the likes. We've not had that opportunity, or we don't have that good fortune here to have had those legacy items from which we're able to generate income. And I would be really anxious to think that this would be a way forward, in part because we've got this call from government to tell us we need to get back to our core services, core business. And I think it would sit really uneasily to suddenly say, hey, but now we're insert whatever provider we are. I think it might be a conversation to be had in the course of a realignment or rationalisation of what local government is in the next few years, potentially, but I think it would be really rash to assume we somehow have some business acumen, entrepreneurship and skills necessary to use ratepayer money to increase the income and therefore offset rates. I just have some real hesitation around that. It's not what we're known for in the sector.
Okay, I've got two more questions, and let's talk about, I think you would agree that this has been your success story. Well, you've been talking about it as your big success, which is water.
Yeah.
Give us a rundown.
Yeah, so waters have been an issue for decades. Again, story of underinvestment, which kind of all came to a head obviously a few years back, and successive governments and successive reports have said we need to get our be honest about the water quality issues. We need to be honest about the deficit in investment in infrastructure and the increasing costs. So about July 2023, I think our conversation at a mayoral level in the Waikato started, and we started the conversation around what would success in the Waikato look like in terms of water. Fast forward to us having to implement our response to this government's local water done well policy. We've landed obviously on a CCO, which I'm really delighted to have had a really big hand in being part of the relationship building necessary in a large sub-regional sense to make it a reality. I think it's fair to say people who've been independent of the sort of politics within organisations have been very clear that there's been a very high level of cooperation and collaboration shown amongst the regional mayors this Trainium, and I feel privileged to have been part of that and had a leading hand in that. And it has had the opportunity of producing a preferred option around the creation of CCOs and the subsequent registration of an incorporated society, Waikato Limited, Waikato Waters Limited, and we're in the throes, I think, of appointing our directors. We're going to be daylighting that about end of this month, start of September. So yeah, look, she's all full steam ahead, and look, it's a good news story, I think, and I'm really proud to have been part of it. If people think we're going to get cheap water, then I'm afraid that's a misconception. All it is it's a case of being able to pull together a collaborative group of councils who enable us the opportunity to put some downward pressure on those prices for a bunch of reasons. I could wax lyrical about it for a long time, but I'm mindful you've got other questions there.
Two more. What did you learn from the bridge debacle?
Oh, what did I learn from the bridge debacle? I learnt... Oh, that's a really good question. I learnt that the dangers or the perils of undertaking large, on the face of it, infrastructure work without understanding that infrastructure is really about people. And you've got to actually put the people at the front of those projects. I, of course, wasn't on the PGG that ran that work, so I wasn't intimately involved with any of it, but I certainly bore the brunt of it when the wheels came off. So I guess that is probably the biggest lesson that I have learnt once the dissection was undertaken. And probably the need for a need for elected member buy-in across the board, because it's not just a Cambridge thing, it's actually a Waipā piece of work that we'll all benefit from in terms of that Cambridge transport story for the next 30 years.
Yeah, that was an interesting business. It reinforced something in my mind that I've been feeling for a long time about a small reactionary group driving arguments. I was quite disgusted by the behaviour, to be honest. Certainly they had some valid points, but the old New Zealand was a little bit more circumspect and courteous in the way that we debated issues. The current New Zealand, the post-COVID New Zealand, something has been let loose, and I'm hoping it will die a natural death, but at the moment it's quite unpleasant. And we have been warned by numerous articles from Radio New Zealand through to Stuff that there are groups trying to get into council who thrive on misinformation and disinformation and who thrive on this kind of division. And they do have quite unpleasant agendas.
Yeah, it is concerning. I think COVID, certainly post-COVID communities, there is certainly a much stronger sense of sort of self-entitlement and loss of a filter and or manners, common manners. And I don't for a minute think that half the things that people write about me or email me about or write on Facebook about me, they would ever contemplate saying face-to-face. And interestingly, some of the candidates in this current election who clearly not my supporters and hold views that I don't share, I've met them face-to-face and they've never raised any of their views about me that they've shared so broadly online to my face. So yeah, some of this comes down to I guess having the courage to have the right conversations and focusing on what the right conversations are and being really clear about what is mis and disinformation and not being not being led or distracted by that. Because there are some really serious big issues we need to address, and I find some of the fringe and disinformation conversations not helpful for that.
Okay, let's finish up. What does Susan O'Regan stand for? This is a question I asked myself. Who is Susan O'Regan and why is she mayor and what does she stand for? I went through everything I could find online. Mm-hmm. I looked right through your social media, went right back 2 or 3 years. I read the articles. And to be honest, I came away thinking, I have no idea. I have a better idea now because I've been sitting with you for over an hour and a half and we've had some, before we turned the camera on, we had a very frank conversation.
Yeah.
So I do now have a better idea, but who are you? Why did you want to be mayor and what do you stand for and what are you going to offer the future of the Waipā?
Okay. Oh gosh, very, very big questions. Who am I? Well, I'm just a Waipā girl, you know. I was brought up at Rukihia. I was brought up in a family that was peppered with farmers and builders and politicians who had love of the land, love of giving back. I've been brought up in a family that was hell-bent on public service and with the ethos that if you have the skills to do something for your community, it's incumbent upon you to use that, whether it's playing the organ at church or putting your hand up for the school PTA. That's what I was brought up to do. Found myself practicing law and then found my way, I guess, back to a farm and then had the opportunity presented to me to go on council. My mother and my father and my grandfather had all been on council before me. So it seemed a logical progression in terms of that public service. And at the time I had a 2-year-old at home, so I was wanting to start doing a little bit of work outside the home too. So I guess that just progressed through. And in terms of why I want to, what my vision or what my hope is for the future, and in particular the future of Waipā, is I wanted a place that my kids can actually say that they can live here and not have to move to Sydney or Edinburgh or San Francisco. You know, I want this place to offer them everything that they need to lead sort of fulfilling lives, and you know, not just in work, but you know, all of the stuff that makes life worth living and stuff too. So, you know, it's about that sort of. I hate the word place shaping, but it is kind of the only word that I can think of that kind of covers it. But you know, it's about making an environment that people want to live in. That our districts can be diverse and welcoming, can balance growth with environmental protection. So all these sort of moving parts, understanding our history, understanding how that informs today and what that may look like into the future. I get a real kick out of thinking what I'm going to, having a hand in leaving my children and my grandchildren. And I keep my eye to the horizon the whole time. So it's that strategic long-term stuff that I get a real thrill out of, and that's what the stuff that we should be doing, and think about how our communities could look into the future and how we can shape them into being the coolest district in New Zealand. So that's what gets me up every morning going, yeah, get out there again. I want to lead. Legacy's too big a fancy, arrogant kind of word, but it kind of is what it is. I just want to leave the place better than what I found it.
Susan O'Regan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. My pleasure.